The second area that you have us looking at here, so you just dove right into one. So we have 5, by the way, that we're starting with, and we're very excited. We have an SRI research team now, and there are 8 of us exactly, and so that's kind of an exciting thing for us. So and we're mining what's out there, and getting our foundations, and then we'll figure out where to go next. So you also chose the effect of stress on neuro and psychological functions. Do you want to talk about what that area is and why you thought it was an important one that that we dive into and see what we can learn?
If you go through the actual neuroscience that's being written today, you'll keep on coming up with this term. They talk about the mind-brain with a slash, or the brain-mind. And there's this growing awareness in guys, and the best example here would be someone like Jaak Panksepp or Bruce McEwen. And there's this understanding now that as we push this science forward, we have so much to learn as psychologists about what's happening in the brain as the brain reacts to stress. But equally, neuroscience has so much to learn from the psychology of looking at behavior, looking at mood, etc. And so somehow, you were talking a second ago about this interdisciplinary effort, and somehow what they were missing, you may have to edit this, but what they were missing was, over and over, what we see happening is fields splitting into opposing camps, and fighting with each other, arguing with each other. But really the reality was that there's truth in both sides. But what they were missing was that framework, that new paradigm, which would enable them to move past these old arguments, past the old arguments, and synthesize what the other is saying. Well, the classic example of this is mind versus brain, right? That's the classic one. And so where are we going to end up? I don't know. Maybe we won't even have the 2 terms anymore. We'll just have.
Fascinating. I think it's really important. It's one of my strengths. I don't talk about my strengths a whole lot, but I think one of them is I'm so eclectic.
Yes.
And so
I would agree.
And so sometimes I'll find the strangest experience I had in my life will give me a different lens than I wouldn't have had if I didn't have that, and they have nothing to do with each other. But that's where it's just like seeing things with different eyes, right? So, and even interesting to look at the same data if you're a neuroscientist versus a sociologist. What do you see? And it's different lenses, and it rounds out. It's like 360 degree view.
I started. So I ran a think tank for I guess 10 years.
Yeah.
The Council of Human Development, and that was an interdisciplinary think tank. And our whole goal was we had, I can't remember how many different fields now, but let's say 6 or 7. And what we did was we all talked about the same problem. So we would come up with the problem, and what emerged from that struck me as being the model for how you do self-rate.
Yeah. So many people try to do interdisciplinary, but they
It's
just piece
hard.
it together.
Yeah, no,
it has to be a new, that's my experience as well. So positive and negative stressors.
So there's some really interesting questions here, right? And this will evolve as we start to pursue it. One of the things that I'm intrigued by is this idea of us. Susan used that metaphor of mining, and I think mining applies here in a big way. And so the question that I would have as we look at this is, there's a simple way of looking at it. The simple way would be saying that we can look at physiological experiments that show, like it's been done with sugar. Okay, so there's a sugar curve, and you can look at the sugar curve, and it will show you that there's that optimal point of a pleasurable or hedonic response to sweetness. But as you go past that point, it becomes bitter. And that's a well-known thing, and food scientists use it. You can look at that. You should look at that. So the point is that we can do that for any kind of stimulus. And that would be a good thing for us to do. Showing how not just that there are these curves, but that the curves are really both individual and that they are state relevant. So your curve is actually going to be a function of the state you're in. It's not this preset thing. All right, so that's good. And that means that we're going to look at physiology. But then I look at something like, let's take Peter Levine. So I love Peter Levine's work. And so what Levine does is so Peter Levine is the one who really started our modern views about trauma. And so what he does is he shows how through the therapeutic process, whatever that involves, you can, now here's the point. The Levine approach is so different from, say, the standard PTSD approach. Instead of saying, how do I get the individual with PTSD to cope with the trauma that they have experienced, he flips it. How do I turn that into a growth experience for that individual? What kinds of things have to be done? Yeah, so it's interesting, right? And so what he's done is he's taken a negative and transformed it into a positive. And that is what I was thinking about with mining. How many different ways can we look at turning negative into positive? How many different disciplines are actually doing this that we can bring together? You know, I suspect that you could say that this is in fact one of the driving things behind psychopharmacology. Okay, so anyways, this will be a very interesting field as we start to pursue it.
Well, and to me, it's a very important one. If we, if one of the goals of this is happier, healthier people, right? Because the more that we learn to do that, the deeper our understanding of how to do that. I mean, it's reframing, right?
Isn't that what
is a big part of it.
Isn't that what we did on Wednesday night?
Yeah, it really is.
No, seriously, right? So there's a very interesting example where food has become this negative experience.
Yeah.
Well, God, if anything needs to be turned into positive, it's eating.
Yeah, absolutely, because we kind of need it.
And it's fun too.
And it is fun. I love food.